Classic. Not classic Andy, just classic.
Yeah, and then it always starts like a couple seconds before I think it does, so it goes silent.
Classic.
All right, good morning, Mr. Brian Moorhead, Mr. Andrew Hunter. How are you?
Good morning. Good morning.
Excellent. Excellent.
Happy
Nice
Friday.
to see you both. The chef is in his lair. So, last episode, the three of us talked about the concept of extreme ownership, which is something that I've certainly learned a lot from. And what the most interesting thing about that to me was how everyone can relate to it in different ways. And I just continue to learn from it. As a related topic, I think it's related, talking about, our egos. And this is a little tougher topic because you say, okay, everyone has an ego, and we certainly know that they're both, a blessing and a curse. The blessing is that having a strong ego provides you a will to win. I don't know about you guys, but a lot of circumstances I approach with the idea of, I know I'm going to win. I'm going to be the best person there. I'm going to work as hard as I possibly can. And while I don't often have more talents than other people, I certainly make up for it by overworking them in a lot of cases.
And your looks.
Yeah. And my good hair, which is
stunningly good looks. And
always stunning. Mm-hmm. Hipster doofus, as Brian typically calls me. The opposite part of that blessing, of course, is the curse of an ego that I like to think of like the cartoon figure that's on your shoulder, whispering bad things to you when you're listening to someone else tell a story or try to contribute, and maybe you want to stamp on them because your idea is better, and instead of just listening up, you offer your opinions. One way I've always known that you can tell when your ego is happening too much, when in that example, is when someone's telling you something, maybe it's a team member you're working with, and you're talking about how to accomplish a project or a mission, and you're, instead of listening to them, you're kind of thinking about what you're going to say while they're talking instead of actually listening to them. Whenever that happens to me, I always try to turn it off, because I can tell that that's my ego speaking up, and not what I should be doing, and then it gets in the way. So we all know that we have egos, and keeping ours in check is pretty tough. And so that's what we're talking about today. I'm guessing, Brian, you lead a team, and you're also, because of the business that you're in, you're not only a service provider, but you're also a salesperson that's responsible to bring in a lot of business for folks. Your ego helps you and it hurts you. How do you keep your ego in check?
So it's an evolution process. Like I would say, now where I am in my career, it wasn't. I didn't always have the same outlook as maybe I did when I was just starting. And you have to really, you said it earlier, like to win. You like to win, and from winning comes confidence, and from confidence, your ego grows. I mean, and so suddenly, it can be a good thing for you, but it also can be, as you continue, and this is like my own journey. As I have grown at Singer Equipment, and as our team has grown from, one person to two people to now, 21 people, your responsibilities change. And when your responsibilities change, suddenly the way you think about things, or the way you thought about yourself or project work, cannot be thought of in the same way, because it's not about you. It's about you. If you're one of 21 people, that's responsible for everything, and certainly needs to keep the bus, moving down the street on the right course, but really have to put yourself to the side. The hardest thing to do for me in my leadership journey, quite honestly, during my career, is as we've elevated and as we've gotten more successful and grown, is to really step aside and let the people that we've developed, and you've worked with, several of my teammates, John Brown and, Ken Deming and Dave Ball, some of the people that we've worked with over the years on the hundreds of restaurants that we've worked. It's not, it's not about Brian Moorhead. It's about those guys and about pushing those guys forward. So really, from an ego perspective, as a leader, you gotta almost put it in a drawer. And yeah, I'm still confident. I still have an ego, all of those things, but I've kind of now tempered it and pushed it. It's more about bringing other people forward than it is about myself. So every day, it's not about, the customers, the $1 million orders or the $15,000 orders. That's a win that's coming from, one of our teammates. They're the guys that are now, interacting with those clients and closing those big deals and helping move themselves along. So yes, I can do it. Yeah, I've done it for 24 years, but it's not helping, it's not helping the overall cause. And, so it comes down to my philosophy of a servant mentality. So I know it's kind of contrary to the ego, but we've all been around, people, and in this business, you're dealing with CEOs and directors of constructions, and those guys have egos. So we have to work with those types. So we're familiar with working with the ego-driven people. We just try to leave it in the drawer for ourselves and do our job the best we can. But really comes down, in my business to, again, me having a servant mentality, serving and helping the others, carrying the water, whatever they need, and not worrying about, being the guy that's getting all the glory or for, whatever projects there are, because it's really not. And that's what, that's been the toughest evolution, but now it's a piece of cake. I enjoy, having other people being the leads and being out there and getting their own name known. So it's been a wonderful journey.
Yeah, you mentioned that last week too, kind of the same you were telling a similar story about, needing to step back, and take ownership of the process and allowing folks to move forward to do their job so that you weren't having to control, the circumstance. And it's interesting, the same kind of thing comes up when you're talking about ego, because really your ego might say, I can't let those, I need to control that situation, or, when something's happening right, give me the credit instead of putting your team out there first. I mean, that does a bunch of things, right? By putting them out there, it shows you're leading by example as well, by showing people this is how you should be acting too, because it actually gets, the ball moved further when you do that as opposed to not, right? So it's interesting how basically the same thing applies to your ego could have gotten in the way of that.
I often say, like, I don't even, like my name on certain things, or if, somebody says the Moorhead team, and I quickly correct them and say, no, it's not, that's not the name of the team. That's not what we do. Because it's not. I mean, we're a collection of people that are working together. So I think the best leaders, and I think the best leaders that we've all worked with are the ones who are, not the guys pounding themselves on the chest and telling everybody how great they are. They're the guys that are doing whatever is needed today. And that could be, at this point in my career, comes to mostly fixing problems every day. That when things pop up, but that is what it is, and that's the nature of being, I think, a leader and having a servant mentality.
You just said something that kind of made me think about something that you know how it's always more impressive when you meet a leader or just anyone at a company that does what you just did. Say, well, no, it's not me. Here's who did that work. These are the folks that are doing that work. I just have the good fortune to work with them. Whenever somebody says that, I remember them. It's like, wow, that person's got their shit together. They are the kind of people that you'd like to be with. You were going to say something, Andrew?
So. Yeah, it makes a few days ago, I spoke via Zoom to Culinary Institute of America students in Hyde Park, New York, and it was an alumni talk. What are you doing, and what have I done since graduation, and what has been my career path. But I said, you guys, you really need to think about, especially in the kitchen, collaboration. Kitchens are such a teamwork kind of environment. You can sink or swim based on what the guy next to you is doing. And I felt like for students, it was important to hear from somebody in the industry talk about collaboration and doing exactly what you guys have been saying, is giving each other credit. You can take credit, but you got to give it as well. And when you report into the boss, to the chef or to the CEO of the company or whatever, if they have half a brain, they know that it took a team to pull this off. So when you say, yeah, I did this and this and this and this, and they know that it was the team that did it, then they don't give you credit in the same way. They might say, yeah, Andrew, that's fine, but they don't give you credit in the same way. So early in people's careers, it's important to understand collaboration and sharing credit, because ultimately success is where all of our egos get fed. So quickly on my own ego, I often say when I'm making a presentation of food, because it's kind of like showing your kids, right? You created this thing, and maybe it's a salad dressing, but it still means something, and you created it. And for me in my lab, I spend a lot of time on maybe 3 or 4 hours on one thing. And so my standard thing is, I work for Wolfgang Puck. If I didn't have thick skin, I'd have no skin. And so, you gotta realize that what you're making, the most important thing when I show something is not whether you and Andy and Brian like it right then and there. It's whether the guests like it. And most importantly, if they come back time and time again to get that salad dressing or that burger or whatever it is that I made. And that's where the ego is fed, is when an item gets onto a menu, because it's hard, right? Even if it's an LTO, and does it go onto the permanent menu, and then does it have longevity? And so I think that egos, it's important when you're thinking about your ego, not to think about immediate gratification as much as a longer term gratification. So I think that if we didn't have egos, we wouldn't get up in the morning, but we have to constantly manage it and understand what's going to feed it and what's going to make for a profitable business.
Yeah. There was something you were just saying that caused me to think. I was on a call with a client this morning who I've just had a great time working with lately. It's the CEO of Jim and Nick's. We've been working together for quite some time now, and the relationship's worked out really well. And I was thinking about this yesterday, and that reminded me this morning. As a designer, a lot of designers, kind of protect their turf, when we're working on a design. If I present something, it's like, well, here's what I think we should do. And your client comes back to you and says, well, maybe it could be this way or that way. I think my past self might have dug in, and said, well, no, we need to do, something this way. But the reality was I think I've evolved enough now to where I can pivot and go, no, listen to those ideas. And at the end of the conversation, we came up with much better ideas, that because I was not digging in on something that I had shown him, and he actually came up with a much better idea and said, well, why don't we do this in this location? So it made tons of sense. And later I was like, in the past, me might have dug in on that. And the end result is that now we have a much better relationship because we're back and forth, on things. And I'm guessing it's very similar. I mean, you said that about Wolfgang. He certainly doesn't want you to not, contribute your ideas. You guys need to work together to come up with that end result that you're talking about.
Yeah. And, I'll say one other thing, especially for the folks out there that are listening, that are in the, that are running restaurants at whatever level, listen to the guys and the gals with their boots on the ground. because they're the ones, you design a kitchen, you put in equipment into that kitchen, and I create the food for it. But if it's difficult for them, I mean, they're going to do it every day. So listen to them throughout the process. They might be making $12 an hour and the CEO is making who knows how much. That $12 an hour employee's opinion and perspective, and I guess ego, is critical to the success of the $1 million CEO. So the smart ones listen at all levels to feedback from their
active
team.
Listening. I think you just said it, and I think that's what and Andy was talking about that earlier. Something like when you're listening to somebody talk, and you're in your own mind, you're checked out. You're not even thinking. You're thinking about what you're going to say next. So I think active listening, becoming a better listener, excuse me, is certainly part of that process. And like you said, Andrew, like if you're gonna, when we're designing kitchens, we want the operators, we want the people with the feet on the street. We want, how's this, how's the prep area got to flow? Where does this have to be? For time and motion, what we talked about that in kitchen design for forever. But also, so listening is important. And I think with ego is we talked about confidence earlier. And when you're confident and you're growing in your career, and that you're confident in your own abilities, the ego can kind of go aside, because you understand, you're confident in yourself and who you are, and it's okay to let somebody else win. It's all right to let the team, your teammate, or your sous chef, or your whoever that may be the person that gets the glory. Because again, a good leader is there are many shapes and sizes and different things, but I get back to carrying the water. If somebody needs a towel to wipe off a bloody knee, that's you. If somebody needs a drink of water, okay, and that's what you need to provide, you need to provide that. If you need to get on the call with Wolfgang and talk about whatever he might be unhappy with, that's you. So you do whatever it takes to make the situation better. And again, it comes from confidence, it comes from active listening, and really from putting that ego aside and understanding, it's a team sport. And I think any successful organization has to understand that it's a team sport. And the people that you have on your team are the people we got to be propping up and pushing forward and investing everything we have in. So that's how we try to we go to the market every single day.
Brian, you called it a servant mentality, which I like, but I might call it a hospitality mentality. Mm-hmm. Hospitality mentality. Yeah. Because, you're talking about providing comfort, is it a towel for a bloody knee, or Kleenex for a runny nose, or any of these kinds of things. And because you're anticipating, because you are actively listening, you're paying attention to facial expressions and body language, and you realize that this person needs a Kleenex or what have you. I know Wolfgang is allergic to flour, so and he works with flour a lot, making pizza dough, etc. So I always have Kleenex when I'm working with him, so I can hand him one. And it just I don't even know if he realizes it anymore. It's just, I mean, he appreciates it on a certain level, but it's just like, oh, there's my Kleenex, blah, blah, blah. It just makes him feel good about working with Andrew, right? Or whoever is anticipating. And it's not because he's the boss. It's just because he's another guy that I have to rely on to do his job so I can do mine.
100%.
It's awesome. I was going to tell a long-winded story about an ego problem that I have, but I think I'm going to not tell that, because I think this conversation has gotten a little bit better. One thing that you both said about a few minutes ago about listening to people's boots on the ground, and Brian, you talking about when we do prototype design work, and maybe you're trying to figure out how kitchen flow works, how important it is just to listen to everybody involved and treat them all as most important. as you and I both know, I remember we were working on a prototype one time, and I think we had a lot of suits in the room, and kind of designing the cook's line around them. I remember at the time thinking, okay, we're just going to take all this information in, and then I'm going to act on it later, because the suits are, of course, thinking, well, we can modify that and customize this and blah 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 blah, and the kitchen staff standing over there in the corner just kind of watching us going, what a bunch of fucking assholes, and we're not including them, and they actually ended up having much better information on how to do the same things than the suits did. And now anymore, when people want to talk about how to do that, they always, I don't know about this happens to you guys, but they want me to kind of design it in place. Hey, we're talking about, let's just do it right now. Well, no, my approach is let's listen to everybody first, and then I'm not really going to tell you kind of exactly what I'm thinking right now. Let me listen to all those comments, listen to everything that's happened, and then put out some work that we can then it's more meaningful after we've listened to everybody involved.
Yep,
definitely. So that's where we are today. We have giant egos, and we've learned a little bit about keeping them in check. I think it's a good conversation. The next thing I want to talk to you guys about here in a couple of weeks is yet another topic, which is about how to give people actual empowerment. I hate the word empowerment because it implies that you have power that you're able to give to someone else. But that's the kind of the term that people understand about it. Another term I've heard is called decentralized command, which I think is a very good one. It's also kind of understanding mission intent so that folks can act on their own. So it's really the idea of how do you set up a team and a philosophy toward allowing other people to do what they need to do to utilize their own gifts to meet that end goal. And how do you do that? I probably told both of you about this book. I know, Brian, I think I did you. One of my favorite books is by a Navy commander called David Marquet, who was a submarine commander who wrote a book called Turn This Ship Around, which surprised me immensely how well it relates to the restaurant industry. He starts out the book telling a story about how, as the commander of the sub, everyone was just doing exactly what he said, even if it made no sense at all. And he realized, wow, if they're going to do what I say, even if it doesn't make sense, we could get into a lot of trouble. People could die as a result of that. Not a good thing. So he decided to figure out a method in which he could, kind of change the way their leadership was, which is explain everybody what the intent was so that everybody can go about their business. And the amazing results that he had are pretty incredible. His team on that one ship, and which started out being the worst in the Navy, ended up being the best. Right. And then they had more officers come out of this one small group than in the history of the entire Navy. So it's a pretty impressive story, and there's a lot of relationships to that, and we all know how empowering those around us to exceed can mean a lot, but it means giving up, right? And Brian, you touched on this twice now about how the most hardest thing for you is kind of stepping back and let your team members do. So I think that's going to be our topic for next time is around that. In the meantime, Brian, as you probably just heard, leads a team at Singer Equipment Company. He's got a division there that specializes in doing an awful lot. They do primarily a lot of chain work, if I'm correct in that. I know you do some
design build. We do a lot of design build stuff. We started off as chains and then kind of morphed into, as people in this business have, as you understand relationships and guys go from one location to the other, I always say they never leave the business. They just go somewhere else. Yeah. Like yourself, right? I followed you around to
the dishwasher, brother.
6 or 8, whatever the case may be, different concepts. And so, just trying to, from concept to completion, you're thinking about them to when we put the lights on and we go live, everything in between, we try to just provide a different level of service than our competition provides. But, it's as Jerry Maguire says, it's a tough business filled with a lot of tough competitors. And, the only thing that separates us is our performance. So that's all we have every day, every job. So it's not about the thousands and thousands of jobs we've completed. It's about the job we have in front of us today. So really blessed, have a great, super team. And certainly I'd like to take credit for it, but I won't. And because I have, 21 of the best people in the business that, I care about deeply, and I want them to be, as successful, more successful than I've ever been. So that's my wish for everybody that I have on my team on a daily basis.
Well, awesome. Well, if you want to get a hold of him, reach out to him at Singer Equipment. You can obviously look him up on LinkedIn. It's Brian Moorhead. He's amazing, and his team is probably the best group of equipment folks I've ever dealt with. Chef Andrew Hunter, you can find him at chefandrewhunter.com. You can also find some of his information on resolutehospitality.net, which is something that him and I've started to work together on. I've been attempting to, Andrew and I started that really because we like each other. We like to work together, and we like Brian as well. So we're attempting.
Funny how that works.
Yeah. So we're trying to work together more often. So we created that in order to do that. But you can find Andrew Hunter on chefandrewhunter.com. Obviously, you can find out about me at andysimpson.net. Very difficult to remember, and resolute.net as well. So thanks for listening today, and we appreciate your time. We will see you all very soon.
All right. Peace, guys. Thank you.
Hang on a minute, my friends.